Hi, I'm Christine Ferretti with BridgeDetroit, and this is
Malachi, Barrett.
and we are here today with Dr. Nikolai Vitti, the Superintendent of Detroit Public Schools Community District. Thank you for joining us
Thank
here.
you for having me.
There's a lot going on and a lot to
Always,
talk about.
always something going on.
I think Malachi and I both have a variety of things we want to go over, especially, in city election year, there's a lot of things that come up about
Yep,
schools.
yep.
And separately, there's been a lot of things going on at the state level. Maybe we could start off today with just talking about, the change in leadership with the state superintendent. I have some notes here. Obviously, Michael Rice mentioned he's retiring. What are your thoughts about that position and what the state needs in the next superintendent to make
Yeah.
academic improvements and other things?
Well, I certainly appreciate Dr. Rice's leadership over the years. I think it was important to have someone coming from the ranks of superintendent and I would call an urban suburban district that was large, and certainly he understood a lot of the challenges I think school districts face. I think he led with always an open ear to problems and issues at the school and district level. So just always appreciated his leadership. I think as we look ahead, I think alignment is the key, and coherency is also the key. I think Michigan continues to lag behind other states because we just don't have coherency around what we should be doing in K-12. I think everyone agrees we need to do better. I think most people agree on that, but we haven't really seen alignment between whoever's in the governor's seat, the legislature, and the Michigan Department of Education. And so I think as we look to the future, whether we're talking about a new state superintendent or a new governor, I think that's going to be key if we're going to improve systemically across the state.
And of course, I'm sure a lot of people know with your expertise that you could be someone who people might like to see in a role like that. Is that something you'd even contemplate at this point?
People have asked.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm really I continue to be encouraged and motivated with the work in Detroit. I think part of our success is sustainability and continuity, and the work can't happen overnight. We made improvements overnight, but I think we've now created a solid foundation to build off of, and I want to continue to do that as long as the relationship with myself and the school board is a strong one. But no, at this point, I have peace, continued challenge, and a sense of purpose and urgency in Detroit, and the state superintendency right now would not be something I'm interested in. But certainly encouraging others to apply and talking to people, on the side about who I think is the right person, or, who could, but ultimately it should be someone that has a systemic view of what Michigan needs to improve systemically, and has a track record of building those systems and processes across an entire state, or at least a large district.
And, we're talking about the work you've been and continue to do with DPSCD. Let's get the latest on chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
It's improving, but it's still a big problem. What are some of the new approaches you guys are taking or considering to kind of continue to fight against this issue?
Yeah, so we still have about 10 days left of the school year, but if everything continues to trend the way we're moving, then the positive point is average daily attendance and chronic absenteeism should be higher on the average daily attendance and lower on the chronic absenteeism than we were before the pandemic. And that's the only two data points that really have not improved beyond where we were from the pandemic. All the other data points, grad rate, literacy rates, math rates, SAT, are all above where we were before the pandemic. And so what we did differently this year, and probably got the most attention, is the high school incentive, where we gave high school students $200 in 2-week intervals if they had 10 days of perfect attendance. And the hardest nut to crack is high school attendance. And what we saw is about a 2 percentage point improvement in average daily attendance, and almost an 8 percentage point improvement in high school drop in chronic absenteeism. So without a doubt, it worked. I think what we're talking about is sustaining that next year, and maybe even looking at middle school students, but we haven't got to that point. But excited to say that we finally have returned to pre-pandemic levels in that area, at least as of today. And the other thing that we're doing is directly trying to attack what I think is the biggest contributor to chronic absenteeism, which is which is concentrated poverty. With the building out of health hubs, so in each of the roughly 12 feeder patterns throughout the city, whether it's in the neighborhood high school or in the large K-8, we're offering free mental health support for families and students, free medical, so primary care, vision screenings, free eyeglasses, dental, and as I said, mental health support. They're also equipped with a family resource center, so we're providing canned goods, other non-perishable goods, help with evictions, help with electric bills, just the issues that get in the way of students coming to school every day. I don't think it should be the district that's doing that, but this is how we're filling the gaps in a society that still hasn't built out the right social networks or nets to fill the gaps of poverty. And I think that we've had thousands of families attend. It's just, the concentration of poverty in the city, and we see it through our children and our families. But when you see the raw numbers of thousands of families accessing these resources, it speaks to the need out in the community. And right now, of the thousands of parents that have attended, 99% have had a solid experience and would recommend the services in the health hubs to other families. So I think we're definitely onto something. All of it's privately funded for at least the next 2 to 3 years, and it's something that we hope to sustain and scale as we go into the future.
Okay. And in terms of, some of the schools, right, we've talked lately, I think, about some of the low enrollment schools,
Mm-hmm.
and, just having like a phase out procession there. What else can we see in the way of this phase out in the next few years? Like, what's on the horizon there?
So as we were thinking about how to best use COVID dollars, about half of the 1.2 million was just used to get through the pandemic. So computers, moving materials online, COVID testing to get everyone back and safe when they're back, dealing with the loss of funding due to the loss of enrollment. That's how half of the money was used. The other half is going to be used for capital improvements. We have not invested heavily in our buildings in over 20 years. Not because we don't want to, but we're not funded to do that. So, a big, I think, change under the Biden administration was to allow us to use federal funding, COVID money, for facility upgrades. And so $700 million is going into brand new buildings, HVAC systems. All schools will have air conditioning in the next 4 years. But part of that was also right-sizing seats versus students. And so as we engage the community, we said, here are the investments you're going to make, but at the same time, we have schools that are very old, sometimes 80 years old, and we have not invested in them. And based on where those schools are situated, we're not seeing increases in residency rates. So let's put our students in the best buildings possible, but we didn't want to replicate what happened under emergency management, which was just randomly closing schools and telling kids they had to go to another school. So we were intentional with phase out. So we announced it, we discussed it, and then, for example, kindergarten wouldn't have new students, and then we would go to first grade not having students, and eventually just phasing out schools rather than forcing children to go to other schools. So we said once enrollment numbers were under 10 per grade level, we would have a conversation about maybe accelerating the phase out because there's so few kids that are remaining in those buildings. So we're not looking to do anything at the end of this year, meaning as we approach the end of the year, but possibly next year. Because I think we have to get ahead of possible federal cuts that we might be seeing in Congress. So if we accelerate the closeout of about 4 to 5 schools, we might generate about anywhere from $11 to $19 million in general fund that we can use to possibly fill gaps that are created with cuts at the federal level that may not happen going into this school year, but the following school year.
Do you already know which ones it would be? Is that already on a public list that we should have access to?
Ann Arbor Trail, Clark, are two off the top of my head. Thurgood Marshall will eventually phase out with the new school at Paul Robeson, Malcolm X. Carson's will have a new building that's really not a phase out. Greenfield Union is one of the phase out schools. But yeah, we've been phasing out those schools for the last 3 years. So parents are well aware in those buildings that this day would come. And it was a way to just not pull the rug underneath families and, again, phase it out rather than an immediate close.
And there'll be some work, I assume, to make sure families are updated. And
yeah, those schools have new neighborhood schools, if you will. And, for example, families with siblings, they've already gone to the new school. The lower grades have been phased out. So we continue to have parent meetings. We've run them this spring, just reminding everyone that this is a phase-out school. Depending on the numbers, you may not have a certain grade level next year, but possibly at the end of next year, those schools might be just accelerated in their phase-out and closed. So most parents are already choosing to go to the school nearby, which is a better building. I mean, it has more modern roofs, HVAC systems, and has more seats.
And I have a couple more things, and then I'll let Malachi ask you a couple items. I mean, you did touch on the federal funding, and I think, haven't you kind of projected that it'll be stable in the interim, but maybe 2026 is when there could be a challenge?
Yeah,
so,
as we go into this school year, still questions about Medicaid and reimbursement. So the district receives about $9 million in reimbursement. That's for students that are provided medical support throughout the year, mainly our special needs children and then social work. About $9 million in reimbursement. There's still questions about that. But what we've been told is that Title I, Title IV will not see changes going into this year. And then the questions are also about Title II, Title III. Title II is for professional development, about $9 million for us, and then Title III, which is support for English language learners, about $1 million. If those things are cut and the state budget is how we expect it to be, then we can absorb the cost for employment and student programs in this year's budget and not make any major cuts or changes. I'm more worried about the budget, not this year, but the following year, because Congress would be able to cut Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV 2 years from now, if you will, because the Congress approves a 2-year budget in its cycle. So we're told that won't happen, but we're also hearing that there'll be initiatives to use Title I money and putting in a separate account to then reimburse any private citizens or companies that donate for children to basically leverage a voucher system to go from public to private. And then this fund would reimburse the individual or entity that would, in a sense, sponsor or pay for the private tuition and then being reimbursed to their taxes. And so that's being floated in Congress right now. My fear with that is that it would take funding out of our coffers to fund. But again, we don't know the details of that, but that would be 2 years from now, not this year. Well, they're talking it could be, I mean, for us anywhere, maybe 25% of the overall budget, which would be substantial. But again, right now, these are just, I think, proposals. I think the big question, I think this will happen in 2 years. The question is, will they fund it by taking money out of existing funds for school districts? That's the question. And so we don't know the answer to that yet.
I mean, for my part, before we kind of transition to some of the mayoral conversations about education, I always kind of ask you about how long, you've been in this role a long time.
Yeah.
What is, how do you envision the future? Is it a place where you want to continue to be after this contract? I know before you had the extension stuff that's already been going through.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about things long term and in the work you've done here?
Well, my contract is, after the second renewal, it would end at the end of the 2028 year. So that's about 3 school years off the top of my head. So, I mean, I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done. I mean, I would say we are now operating normally. From hiring teachers, training teachers, our curriculum. I think the work ahead is one, complete the $700 million of facility projects. I think that's going to be a major change for our students, our families, and staff. Continue to be very competitive around teacher salaries. I mean, We went from 400 teacher vacancies to where we manage about a dozen, which is much better than where we were in even other suburban school districts. I am. I have a sense of pride of our student achievement improvement, but I'm not satisfied. And so if you ask me what is it that you want to accomplish between now and the end of your contract or beyond, it would to accelerate student achievement. I mean, we've seen our improvement and achievement is the highest it's ever been as a district, but continuing to narrow the gap between us and the state is what I want to continue to do. We've seen anywhere from 3 to 5 percentage point improvements, which is on a positive trajectory compared to even the state, which has been stagnant or declining. So obviously we're doing something better and differently, but it's just maturing systems, processes, continuing to develop leaders, and accelerating that achievement so we can do a better job of narrowing the gap between us and the state even more. And then finally, when we talk about NAEP, fourth graders, eventually getting to the point where we're at least in the middle of the pack among large urban school districts. We're still at the bottom, and although we're seeing more improvement than other large urban school districts, the raw score is still toward the bottom, and I think that's something that we want to improve moving forward. Obviously, continue to improve enrollment, and all of that, but those are the couple things that I still want to accomplish, and then hopefully, if I feel like it's time and the board thinks it's time, to be a part of a succession management process. So we all agree who the next superintendent is, and I can help that person transition, and the work can continue with continuity and not disruption.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're in an election year, and education, as always, is a top issue for the candidates. A lot of them have been talking about ways that the next mayor could be more involved in the schools, although obviously there's limitations of authority and what the city can do.
Right.
Nobody really seems to be proposing anything like a school takeover, but they are suggesting various ways to get more hands-on. An education commission is one idea that would basically convene the board, various stakeholders at the city, within the city government to address issues. Do you find any value in that potential idea?
Well, you know me. I'm going to be direct. No, not really. The people of Detroit elect the school board, and that school board is elected and empowered, and it took a long time to get to this point. And our track record of success is clear. Whatever academic data point you want to look at, we've improved, and I'll directly name them. Teacher vacancies. Teacher pay, teacher retention. Detroit now is near the top in teacher retention in Metro Detroit. Huge investments in buildings. Our student achievement is a lot of work to do, but we're improving faster than the state and faster than most city charter schools. Our market share in the city for the percentage of kids and where they attend has grown for DPSCD at a higher rate than suburban than city charters, and those that leave. And so our graduation rate now is at 78%, only 4 percentage points away from the state average, 82. So I think the conversation should be less about, we need to do something differently from a governance point of view, and think more about partnership. How do we fill gaps that our families and our students experience through city leadership? And so I think the opportunity there is better funding summer programming, better funding after school programming, better funding and supporting things like health hubs, to address the concentration of poverty, attacking affordable housing, making sure that families can stay in one location so they're not having to jump from school to school, investing more in mass transportation. So if students do decide not to attend their neighborhood school, which they should have a right to, they can get to and from school with reliability. Buses are going to be on time, they're going to be safe, and then ultimately bringing more businesses to the city so our families can make a livable wage. And if they're able to do that, that trickles down to children. If children see their parents jumping from job to job, being unemployed, having to move from home to home, apartment to apartment complex, that just creates instability, anxiety, stress, and that plays out in our schools. So I think it's better about attacking those issues, which then will just help the livelihood and experience of children in the city. I think Mayor Duggan has done a great job of saying, I'm going to focus on the city, you focus on the school district, and let's collaborate on things that I can help you with and you can help me with. And I think that's gone well, and our improvement has shown that. Look, there were people 8 years ago when I came to this conference that wondered whether an elected board could work in the city, and I think we've proved that it can. So I think it's less about, oversight or new governance structure. It's really more about collaborating and seeing more investment in the things that we're not funded to invest in.
Yeah. I was going to ask what a healthy relationship looks like, but I think you just outlined that. So another thing that really has gotten a lot of attention is the number of unhoused students in the school system.
Yeah.
And there have been some proposals to create affordable housing and maybe more shelters and things like that.
Yeah.
Today I was approached by the Detroit Association of Realtors who, it sounds like they're working with you on a plan for the Renaissance Center.
There's been proposals to do that. What I've said is I don't think we're in a position to directly invest, just because we have buildings that still need investment. So it's hard to think about building yet a new building or invest our dollars in something new when we have kids in buildings that still need modern HVAC systems, for example. But what I've said is, if the right people come to the table and the funding is there, there's certainly an opportunity, for example, to create maybe a boarding school for boys or for girls or for families, just to continue to address the instability of housing. What I always say is, look at, for example, our data when we talk about student achievement. Well, we know with our own kids, if they miss 18 or fewer days of school, these are our kids, not some random Harvard study. Our kids, they miss 18 or fewer days of school, they're 3 or 5 times more likely to be at an above grade level on MSTEP or SAT. Part of that is about stable housing and affordable housing. And so we know we are doing the right thing when they're with us, but we have to make that more consistent. So one thing that a lot of people have been talking about a long time is something like a residency housing with education connected to it, so that we can overcome some of the challenges that come along with concentration of poverty. And you've seen a version of that with the Harlem, I think it's the Harlem Children's School, and just thinking about putting kids in a safe, consistent environment, providing the wraparound services there, so that you directly attack the issues that are linked to concentrated poverty in the city. And so I think an initiative like that could go a long way and just some proof points on what our students are capable of doing when you address the poverty issue.
So long as somebody else redevelops that building.
You're right, yeah. I mean, we would be partners. We can provide the teachers, we'll provide the curriculum, and there's maybe transportation, some other additional resources, but the actual building, we wouldn't be able to put one penny into that. Similar to what we did at Marygrove. Marygrove College, was a school that obviously was not getting enough enrollment to sustain itself. We partnered with the conservatory. Now we have what we call the Cradle to College Continuum, and now we have pre-Ks run by Starfish, but we have kindergarten now. Off the top of my head, the 5th grade, and we've been running the high school. And eventually it'll be a K-12 school, obviously not residential, but in the city, and the college experience is there with the University of Michigan. A great innovative program, but we didn't put money in the building. That's my point.
And this would be something, are you kind of waiting back to see if those partners come together, or you're not taking the lead on it necessarily?
No. I think it would be difficult to take the lead on, only because we have needs for capital in our own buildings, hoping to continue to implement the $700 million of projects, prove to the city that we can manage those resources well, complete projects well, and inevitably we're going to have to go for a bond. So that would probably be another legacy point to the question of what would you still like to do. Probably 2008, 2028, 2029, 2030. We'd probably have to go for a bond to then put all of our buildings in a place that kids really deserve in 2025, 2026.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, I think it was maybe a year ago or maybe a little bit longer than that, you released a letter about marijuana use in the schools and how rampant the problem was.
Yep.
And it really sent off a signal flare to the city council. They were trying to find maybe things that they could do to help address that. What's changed since then? It's been a little bit of time. Has that problem gotten better, worse?
Well, I would say minimally, it definitely has created more awareness among parents, among city leaders, I think state leaders. Unfortunately, though, I haven't seen a lot of change in legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think, the issue that people have to understand about this is it's not about the dispensaries in and of itself. It's not like kids are going to the dispensary and buying, maybe some high school kids, but not, I'm talking about young children.
Yeah.
They're not walking in there and buying it. It's just, it is so accessible and prevalent now within the city and Metro Detroit in general that it's just very easy for an everyday kid to come in contact with the edibles. And so we're to this day experience at least one incident a week where a child, as young as third grade, to a senior is either experimenting or they don't know it's laced marijuana. And we haven't lost any children, but it leads to vomiting, hallucinations, and kids being rushed to the hospital, which is just traumatic and disruptive to the learning environment. So, I feel like every 3 months I send out the robocall, the letter to our families, check the backpacks, talk to the kids about who they're hanging out with, that don't eat anything that didn't come from home or from school. And this is just a new reality that unfortunately schools and families have to navigate through.
Do you have a sense of what legislation could address this, especially if some of this is coming from the home itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a citizen, as a Detroiter, I think we have too many dispensaries in the city. I'll just be direct. I'm all for the legalization, but it's prevalent. It's like commonplace. It's getting to the point where they're like liquor stores. Just too many. I'd rather see the profit and revenue coming from the city than Metro Detroit, but just too many. And I'd like to see more advertising, more awareness campaigns about the dangers of marijuana, about families, adults being responsible with storing them, not making them accessible, and just having conversations about marijuana and edibles in particular, whether that's TV commercials, radio ads, billboards, very similar to what we started to see in the 90s with the cigarette, campaign that worked. It was effective, and I think as long as we educate our families and our children, we can curb it. It's a good example of the pendulum swinging from, incarcerating folks for using and selling marijuana to now it's too accessible, and we're seeing the pendulum swing to where I think it's hurting our youth.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Always enjoy the conversation.
Covered a lot of ground, but appreciate your time and your feedback on all of this stuff.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank